The late October sun bled gold across the rolling hills surrounding Willow Creek Manor, setting the turning leaves ablaze in hues of amber, crimson, and rust. Elara Vance stood at the large bay window of the master bedroom, her hands resting protectively on the curve of her belly, where her child, a tiny, insistent life, somersaulted gently. She was 32 weeks along, and the weight of this precious burden was both a comfort and a constant reminder of her body's profound, consuming task. Willow Creek Manor, a lovingly restored farmhouse nestled deep in a Vermont valley, had been their dream, hers and Richard's, a sanctuary. 2 years they had poured into its resurrection, Elara's architectural eye refining its historic bones, Richard's pragmatic business sense ensuring the project stayed on track. Now, it was meant to be the cradle for their family, a fortress of peace against the clamor of Richard's city life, a place where their child would know the scent of pine and damp earth, the hush of snowfall, the symphony of spring. "He's active today," Elara murmured, a soft smile touching her lips. The he was an assumption, a feeling. They'd chosen not to find out the sex, preferring the universe's surprise. Richard, emerging from the ensuite, towel-drying his dark hair, came to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. His familiar scent, a blend of expensive soap and his own unique musk, was an anchor. "He knows his dad's home for the whole weekend," Richard said, his voice a low rumble against her ear. "Smart kid." Elara leaned back into him, a sigh of contentment escaping her. These moments, these stolen weekends when Richard wasn't consumed by the voracious demands of his investment banking career, were her sustenance. The city, where he spent most weekdays, felt a world away from their secluded haven. "The colors are breathtaking this year," she said, her gaze sweeping over the tapestry of the forest that climbed the opposite slope. "I'm glad we'll be here for his first autumn." "Our first autumn as a family," Richard corrected gently, pressing a kiss to her temple. His hands mirrored hers on her belly, a shared gesture of anticipation. Life, Elara often thought, felt like one of her meticulously planned architectural renderings, every line, every shade, perfectly placed. Her love for Richard was the foundation, strong and unwavering. The baby was the light flooding through the windows, illuminating every corner with promise. The demands of the late-stage pregnancy, however, had begun to etch lines of fatigue around her eyes. Dr. Ainsworth, her obstetrician in the nearby town of Oakhaven, had advised more rest, less stress. It was Dr. Ainsworth who had gently suggested hiring some live-in help for the remaining weeks and the initial period after the baby's arrival. "Just until you're back on your feet, Elara," she'd said, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "You're doing wonderfully, but let's not borrow trouble." Richard had seized upon the idea with an enthusiasm that surprised Elara. "Absolutely. Whatever you need, darling. I'll find someone perfect." And he had, or so it seemed. Clara Hayes arrived a week ago, a young woman of 20, slight and quiet, with wide, doe-like eyes and hair the color of ripe corn. She hailed from a small, struggling town further north, and the position at Willow Creek Manor, with its generous pay and beautiful surroundings, was clearly a significant step up for her. Clara was efficient, almost preternaturally quiet in her movements. She cleaned, cooked simple meals when Elara felt too tired, and mostly kept to herself in the small guest cottage adjacent to the main house, which Richard had insisted she occupy for her privacy. "She's a godsend, isn't she?" Richard had remarked several times, perhaps a little too effusively. "So helpful, and hardly makes a sound," Elara agreed, though a tiny, unbidden flicker of something she couldn't name stirred within her. Perhaps it was the subtle shift in the household rhythm, the presence of a near stranger in their intimate space. Or perhaps it was Clara's youth, a stark contrast to Elara's own burgeoning matronliness. She dismissed it as pregnancy-induced sensitivity, a fleeting shadow in the golden light. The days settled into a new routine. Elara rested, read, put the finishing touches on the nursery, a room painted in soft sage green, with a hand-stenciled border of woodland creatures. Richard commuted, his calls home filled with endearments and solicitous inquiries about her well-being. Clara moved through the house like a whisper, her presence unobtrusive yet constant. One afternoon, Elara was upstairs, propped against a mountain of pillows in their bed, sketching idly in a notebook, a whimsical treehouse design for a future child. The house was quiet, save for the distant hum of the washing machine and the rustle of autumn leaves against the window pane. She must have dozed off. She awoke slowly, the room dimming as the sun dipped lower. A murmur of voices drifted up from the kitchen below. Richard was home early. A warmth spread through her. She started to call out, then paused. The voices were hushed, intimate. Not the usual cadence of employer and employee. "Don't know how I'd manage without you here, Clara," Richard was saying. His tone was different, softer, imbued with a tenderness Elara usually reserved for herself. "It's nothing, Mr. Vance," Clara's voice, higher, a little breathless. "I like helping." "Richard, please, we've been over this." A soft chuckle. Elara's blood ran cold. "You're more than just help, you know." A pause. Then Clara again, barely audible. "You're very kind, Rich, Mr. Vance." A flustered correction. Elara's breath caught in her throat. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She pressed her hand to her mouth, stifling a gasp. It was nothing. It had to be nothing, a misinterpretation. Her hormones, her fatigue, twisting innocent words into something monstrous. But the quality of the silence that followed, a silence that seemed to stretch and hum with unspoken things, was more damning than any words. She lay there, frozen, long after the faint sounds of Clara tidying up and Richard moving to his study reached her. The golden light outside had faded to a bruised purple. The beautiful, serene room suddenly felt like a cage. The first hairline crack had appeared in the foundation of her perfect world. The days that followed were a torment. Elara moved through them as if encased in glass, observing her life from a slight, chilling distance. Every interaction, every shared glance between Richard and Clara was now scrutinized, dissected, imbued with a dreadful potential significance. Richard's kindness towards her seemed amplified, almost cloying. He brought her breakfast in bed, massaged her swollen ankles, spoke endlessly of their future with the baby. Was it genuine solicitude or a carefully constructed facade? The question coiled in her stomach like a venomous snake. Clara, once a quiet shadow, now seemed to loom large in Elara's perception. Her youth, her deference, the way her eyes sometimes darted towards Richard when she thought Elara wasn't looking, were these the innocent actions of a young woman in a new environment, or something more calculated, more clandestine? Elara found herself listening, always listening. The creak of a floorboard in the night, a hushed conversation fading as she entered a room, the ringtone of Richard's phone hastily silenced. The magnificent, sprawling house, once her sanctuary, now felt like a labyrinth of secrets, its quiet corners potentially harboring betrayal. The late autumn landscape, once a source of joy, now seemed to mock her. The vibrant leaves, falling in droves, carpeted the earth in a melancholic shroud. The air grew crisper, carrying the bite of impending winter, a chill that mirrored the one seeping into Elara's soul. She tried to rationalize. Richard was stressed. He worked incredibly hard. Perhaps he simply appreciated Clara's efficiency, her unobtrusive presence. Perhaps that overheard conversation was merely an awkward attempt at kindness, misconstrued by her overly sensitive pregnant mind. She clung to these explanations, desperate for them to be true. But the doubt, once planted, sent insidious roots deep into her psyche. She lost her appetite. Sleep became a battlefield where fragmented anxieties and nightmarish scenarios played out. During one of her checkups, Dr. Ainsworth frowned at her chart. "Your blood pressure is a little elevated, Elara, and you've lost a bit of weight. Are you feeling all right? Any unusual stress?" Elara forced a smile. "Just the usual third trimester jitters, I suppose." Eager to meet the little one. She couldn't bring herself to voice the grotesque fear that was consuming her. To speak it aloud would be to give it a terrifying solidity. Dr. Ainsworth's gaze was perceptive, lingering a moment too long. "Well, try to take it easy. Delegate more to Clara. That's what she's there for. And call me if anything feels off, anything at all." Elara nodded, a lump forming in her throat. Delegate more to Clara. The irony was a bitter pill. One evening, Richard was late. He'd called, something about a crucial deal, a dinner meeting he couldn't get out of. Elara ate alone, Clara having prepared a light supper and then retreated to her cottage. The silence of the large dining room pressed in on Elara. She found herself wandering restlessly through the house, each tick of the grandfather clock in the hall amplifying her unease. She ended up in Richard's study. It was usually his domain, a masculine space filled with dark wood, leather-bound books, and the faint scent of his cologne. She ran her hand along his polished mahogany desk. Why was she here? What was she looking for? Proof of her sanity or confirmation of her deepest fear? Her gaze fell upon his laptop, closed but not shut down. A reckless impulse seized her. Her heart hammered. This was wrong, a violation of trust. But hadn't trust already been violated, potentially by him? Her fingers trembled as she lifted the screen. It sprang to life, his email program open. She averted her eyes, a wave of shame washing over her. But then, a small, almost hidden window caught her attention, a messaging app she didn't recognize. There was one active chat. The contact name was simply C. With a sickening lurch, she clicked on it. The messages were few and recent. Terribly, damningly recent. C, he's asleep now. Thinking of you. You too. This is complicated, but thank you for today, for listening, always. Be careful, okay? Elara stared at the screen, the words blurring. Complicated. Be careful. The casual intimacy, the shared secrecy. It wasn't a lurid confession, no declarations of undying love, but it was enough. It was more than enough. It was the cold, hard confirmation that the ground beneath her feet was not solid, that the man she loved, the father of her child, was living a life she knew nothing about, a life that included Clara in a way that was utterly, devastatingly inappropriate. A low, guttural sound escaped her, a sound of pure anguish. She slammed the laptop shut, her body shaking uncontrollably. The room, his study, their home, suddenly felt alien, contaminated. She stumbled back to the bedroom, collapsing onto the bed, a storm of emotions raging within her. Disbelief, fury, a grief so profound it felt like a physical wound, and beneath it all, a cold, terrifying clarity. This wasn't just in her head. This was real. Richard returned close to midnight, full of apologies and protestations of a client dinner that had dragged on. He found Elara feigning sleep, her back to him, her body rigid. He tried to draw her close, but she remained unresponsive. "Elara, honey, what's wrong?" His voice was laced with concern, a concern that now sounded hollow, rehearsed. She couldn't speak. The words were trapped, a toxic brew of accusation and pain. If she spoke now, she would shatter, and she couldn't shatter. Not yet. There was the baby. Her baby. The next few days were a blur of forced normalcy. Elara was polite, distant. She avoided being alone with Richard, finding excuses to rest, to read, to be anywhere but in his presence. She watched Clara with a new, cold detachment. The young woman seemed oblivious. Or perhaps she was a consummate actress. Elara could no longer tell. The weight of the unspoken truth was crushing. It poisoned the air, leached the color from their beautiful home. Elara felt her love for Richard, that once a vibrant, living thing, begin to wither, replaced by a bewildered sorrow and a nascent, unfamiliar anger. The breaking point came on a gray, blustery Saturday. Richard had suggested a walk, a chance to get some fresh air, to reconnect. Elara had reluctantly agreed, desperate for any distraction from the turmoil inside her. Clara had the day off and had apparently gone to visit a friend in Oak Haven. They walked along the creek path, fallen leaves crunching underfoot. The sky was the color of lead, threatening rain. Richard tried to make small talk, his attempts at cheerfulness falling flat in the oppressive atmosphere. Elara was quiet, her gaze fixed on the churning water of the creek. Finally, Richard stopped, turning to face her. "Elara, what is it?" he asked, his voice strained. "You've been distant for days. Is it the baby? Are you worried?" She looked at him then, truly looked at him. At the handsome face she had loved so fiercely that the lines of concern etched around his eyes. Lines she now suspected were born of guilt, not love. "Richard," she began, her voice surprisingly steady, though her insides were trembling. "Who is C?" His face went pale. A flicker of something, fear, crossed his features before being quickly masked. "C. I don't know what you mean." "The messaging app on your laptop, Richard," Elara said, her voice quiet but relentless. "The one you use to talk to Clara when you think I'm not aware." The denial died on his lips. He stared at her, his expression a mixture of shock and a dawning, desperate realization that the game was up. The wind whipped around them, snatching at her hair, mirroring the storm that was about to break. This was it. The precipice. And Elara knew with a chilling certainty that there was no turning back. Richard's composure shattered. For a moment, he looked utterly lost, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. The bluster, the easy charm, drained away, leaving behind a raw, exposed vulnerability that almost elicited a pang of pity from Elara. But the wound he had inflicted was too fresh, too deep. "Elara, it's not what you think," he stammered, his gaze darting away from hers towards the turbulent creek as if seeking an escape. "Then what is it, Richard?" Her voice was deceptively calm, a thin veneer over the maelstrom of emotions. "Tell me. Because what I think is that you've been having an affair with the young woman we hired to help me in our home while I carry your child." Each word was an indictment, precise and devastating. The wind howled through the bare branches of the willows lining the creek, a mournful chorus to her accusation. He flinched as if struck. "No, not an affair. It It just happened. It wasn't planned. It's complicated. Complicated. Elara repeated, a bitter laugh escaping her. That's the word you used with her, isn't it? This is complicated. What's so complicated, Richard? Betraying your pregnant wife? Lying to her face day after day? Or perhaps the logistics of juggling us both under the same roof? He ran a hand through his hair, his face ashen. Please, Elara, don't. She's just a kid. She's lonely. I was stressed. The pressure at work, the baby coming. I made a mistake, a terrible, stupid mistake. His excuses, flimsy and self-serving, only fueled the cold anger that was now eclipsing her grief. A mistake, she said, her voice rising slightly. This isn't like forgetting to pick up milk, Richard. This is a betrayal of everything we built, everything I believed in. Tears pricked at her eyes, hot and furious, but she blinked them back. She would not cry in front of him. Not now. He looked down, shame coloring his features. We talked. A lot. She understood the pressure I was under. And yes, he finally admitted, his voice barely a whisper, it became physical. A few times. It was wrong. I know it was wrong. I was going to end it. The admission, stark and unadorned, landed with the force of a physical blow. Elara felt the air leave her lungs, a few times. While she lay upstairs, heavy and vulnerable, trusting him implicitly. The pain was a searing white heat. You were going to end it, she repeated, her voice flat. When, Richard? After the baby was born? Or were you hoping I'd never find out? He had no answer. He just stood there, a portrait of wretchedness, the wind whipping his expensive coat around him. And in that moment, amidst the wreckage of her marriage, a new powerful emotion surged through Elara, a fierce, primal protectiveness. It wasn't just her pain anymore. It was the thought of her child, innocent and unknowing, being born into this toxic atmosphere of deceit and broken trust. Her hand went to her belly, a shield. My baby, she said, her voice suddenly strong, resolute, will not be born into this, will not be raised in a house built on lies and infidelity. Richard looked up, his eyes wide with a new kind of fear. Elara, what are you saying? We can fix this. I'll do anything. I'll end it with Clara immediately. She can leave today. We can go to counseling. Please, don't throw away everything we have. We don't have anything anymore, Richard, she said, the finality in her tone chilling even herself. You threw it away. You made that choice. She paused, drawing a ragged breath. The first drops of icy rain began to fall, splattering against their faces. I want you to leave Willow Creek. Today. Leave? He looked stunned. But where will I go? What about the baby? What about you? You'll figure it out, Elara said, her voice devoid of sympathy. You're good at figuring things out, aren't you? As for me and the baby, we will be fine. I will make sure of it. The vow spoken aloud resonated with an undeniable power. This was her turning point. The victim was receding, the protector emerging. Elara, please, he begged, reaching for her arm. She pulled away as if burned. Don't touch me, she said, her voice low and dangerous. Go back to the house. Pack your things. I want you gone before nightfall. She turned and started walking back towards the manor, her steps unsteady at first, then firming with each stride. The rain was coming down harder now, cold and cleansing. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Back at the house, the confrontation with Clara was almost an anticlimax. The young woman was in the kitchen, preparing to make tea, when Elara entered, her clothes damp, her face set in an expression of grim determination. Clara looked up, her eyes widening slightly at Elara's appearance. Mrs. Vance, are you all right? You're soaked. Clara, Elara said, her voice even, your services are no longer required. I'd like you to pack your things and leave Willow Creek Manor immediately. The color drained from Clara's face. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again, looking from Elara to the doorway, as if expecting Richard to appear and save her. Mr. Vance is also leaving, Elara stated, preempting any appeal. This arrangement is over. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She looked young, frightened, and suddenly very small. Mrs. Vance, I am so sorry. I never meant. I'm not interested in your intentions, Clara. Elara cut her off, the coldness in her voice surprising even herself. Only in the consequences. You have an hour. She didn't wait for a reply, turning and walking towards the stairs, her hand protectively on her belly. Each step was an effort, but each step also solidified her resolve. She would not crumble. She would not allow this betrayal to define her or her child's future. The storm outside raged, mirroring the tempest in her heart. But within that storm, a tiny, fierce flame of maternal love had been ignited, and Elara knew, with an unshakable certainty, that she would do whatever it took to shield that flame, to nurture it, to ensure her child was born into a world of honesty and unwavering love, even if she had to build that world herself, brick by painful brick. The hours that followed were a desolate landscape of raw emotion. Richard, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning despair, moved through the house like a ghost, packing his bags in a stunned silence punctuated by occasional broken attempts at apology, at reasoning, that Elara met with a wall of unyielding quiet. She couldn't speak to him. Not yet. The words were lodged in her throat, a knot of grief and fury. Clara departed first, a small, forlorn figure disappearing down the long driveway in a local taxi, her head bowed. Elara watched from an upstairs window, a strange admixture of anger and a fleeting, uncomfortable pity stirring within her. Clara was young, perhaps naive, perhaps opportunistic. It hardly mattered now. She was a catalyst, a symbol of the fracture, and her absence was the first small step towards reclaiming the sanctity of the space. Richard's departure was more protracted, more painful. He lingered at the doorway, his expensive suitcase standing forlornly beside him. "Elara, please," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Don't do this. Let's talk. We can survive this." Elara stood in the hallway, her arms crossed over her belly, her expression unreadable. The scent of the rain-soaked earth drifted in through the open door, heavy and cold. "There's nothing left to say right now, Richard. You need to go." He looked at her, his eyes pleading, searching for a flicker of the love that had once bound them. He found only a profound, weary sorrow. With a final, defeated sigh, he picked up his bag and stepped out into the dreary afternoon. Elara closed the door behind him, the click of the latch echoing through the suddenly cavernous house. Silence descended. A silence so profound, so absolute, it was almost a physical presence. Elara leaned against the closed door, her legs trembling, and then slowly, carefully sank to the floor. The carefully constructed dam of her composure finally broke. Sobs racked her body, tearing gasps of pain that came from the deepest recesses of her shattered heart. She wept for her lost love, for her broken dreams, for the innocence that had been irrevocably stolen. She wept for the child within her, who would never know the untainted joy of the family she had envisioned. The house, their dream home, felt like a mausoleum. Every object, every cherished memory, was now tainted by the shadow of betrayal. The beautiful autumnal light that filtered through the windows seemed weak, unable to penetrate the gloom that had settled over her spirit. After what felt like an eternity, the storm of tears subsided, leaving her exhausted, hollowed out, but strangely lighter. The truth was out. The unbearable tension of the unspoken was gone. What remained was the raw, gaping wound, but at least now she could see it, acknowledge it, begin to tend to it. Her first coherent thought was, Lydia. Her fingers, stiff and clumsy, dialed her sister's number. Lydia Brewster, a high-powered lawyer in the city, was Elara's rock, her pragmatic, fiercely loyal older sibling. "Elara, what's wrong? You sound terrible." Lydia's voice, sharp and instantly concerned, cut through Elara's daze. The story tumbled out, disjointed and tear-choked. Lydia listened, her interjections growing from worried murmurs to sharp intakes of breath to finally a low, simmering fury. "That absolute bastard," Lydia breathed when Elara had finished. "I'm coming. I'll be there by evening. Don't you dare be alone with this, Elara. Lock the doors." "Are you safe?" "Yes," Elara managed. "He's gone. They're both gone." "Good. I'm on my way. We'll figure this out. You and the baby are what matter now." Lydia's impending arrival was a lifeline. Elara ended the call and then, with a surge of newfound urgency, called Dr. Ainsworth's office. The doctor, sensing the distress in Elara's voice, agreed to see her immediately. The drive to Oak Haven was a blur. Dr. Ainsworth's calm, kind face was a balm to Elara's frayed nerves. She listened patiently as Elara recounted the traumatic events, her expression compassionate but professional. She checked Elara's blood pressure, listened to the baby's heartbeat, strong and steady, a small, resilient rhythm in the midst of chaos. "Elara," Dr. Ainsworth said gently, taking her hand, "you've been through a profound shock. The most important thing right now is you and the baby. Stress like this isn't good, but you are strong, and we will monitor you closely. Your primary focus now must be on self-care, on creating a calm environment for yourself, as much as that's possible." She offered practical advice: rest, nutrition, gentle exercise if Elara felt up to it. She also suggested talking to a therapist, someone who could help her navigate the emotional minefield ahead. Elara nodded, grateful for the tangible guidance. "And Elara," Dr. Ainsworth added, her gaze unwavering, "this is not your fault. You did nothing to cause this. Remember that." Those words, simple and direct, resonated deeply. The insidious whispers of self-blame that had begun to creep into Elara's thoughts quieted slightly. Lydia arrived as dusk was settling, her car pulling up the driveway with a determined crunch of gravel. She swept into the house like a whirlwind of protective energy, her embrace fierce and comforting. She took one look at Elara's pale face and shadowed eyes and immediately took charge, making tea, checking the locks, her brisk efficiency a stark contrast to Elara's numb inertia. "Right," Lydia said, settling onto the sofa opposite Elara, a steaming mug in her hand. "First things first. He's out. Good. Has he tried to contact you?" "A few texts," Elara admitted, her voice dull. "Pleading, apologizing, I haven't replied." "Don't," Lydia advised sharply. "Not yet. You need space. He needs to understand the enormity of what he's done. Legally, we can discuss options later, separation agreements, child support, but for now, focus on you." The next few days passed in a haze of Lydia's practical care and Elara's slow, painful processing. Lydia handled the calls from a distraught, remorseful Richard, her tone coolly professional, informing him that Elara needed time and would contact him when she was ready. She cooked, cleaned, and filled the oppressive silence of Willow Creek Manor with her steady, grounding presence. Richard, from his exile in a sterile city hotel room, was indeed grappling with the consequences. Glimpses into his psyche revealed a man adrift in a sea of guilt and self-recrimination. The affair with Clara, born of a reckless cocktail of stress, ego, and a misguided search for validation, now seemed tawdry and pathetic in the harsh light of Elara's pain. He missed her, missed their life, missed the dream of the family they were supposed to be. His messages to Elara, initially desperate and self-pitying, slowly began to show a dawning, painful awareness of the profound hurt he had caused. He started looking into therapy, a suggestion Lydia had curtly relayed. Clara, meanwhile, had returned to her small hometown, the dream of Willow Creek Manor having turned into a humiliating nightmare. She faced an uncertain future, her brief, ill-advised entanglement leaving a bitter taste of regret and a premature, harsh lesson in the complexities of adult relationships and their devastating fallout. For Elara, the nursery became her sanctuary. The soft sage-green walls, the whimsical woodland creatures she had so lovingly stenciled, now took on a new significance. This room was her promise to her child, a promise of safety, of love, of a world untainted by the betrayal that had fractured her own. She folded tiny clothes, organized diapers, rocked gently in the nursing chair, humming lullabies to the precious life within her. Each small act was a meditation, a reaffirmation of her purpose. She sometimes encountered Martha Jenkins, the elderly gardener, tending to the roses that stubbornly clung to life even as winter approached. Martha, with her weathered face and soil-stained hands, rarely spoke much, but her quiet, rhythmic work, pruning, mulching, preparing the earth for its long sleep, was a silent testament to resilience, to the cyclical nature of life, death, and renewal. Elara found a strange comfort in her presence, a sense of continuity that transcended her personal turmoil. The vibrant hues of autumn gave way to the stark, monochromatic beauty of early winter. Frost silvered the lawns in the mornings, and the bare branches of the trees sketched intricate patterns against the pale sky. The landscape, stripped of its finery, possessed a raw, honest beauty that resonated with Elara's own stripped-down emotional state. Lydia eventually had to return to the city, her work demanding her presence, but she left Elara stronger, more grounded with a clear plan of action. Elara started seeing a therapist Dr. Ainsworth had recommended, a kind, insightful woman who helped her navigate the complex terrain of her grief and anger. She began to think about Richard, not with the raw pain of the initial days, but with a burgeoning, sad clarity. The love she had felt for him was undeniably real, but so was the betrayal. Could they rebuild? She didn't know. The question was too large, too daunting to contemplate yet. For now, her focus was singular, her baby. One crisp December morning, as a light snow began to fall, dusting the landscape in a pristine white, Elara felt a familiar, insistent pressure. It was time. A wave of calmness, surprisingly, washed over her. She was ready. She called Dr. Ainsworth, then Lydia. And then, after a moment's hesitation, she sent a brief, factual text to Richard. "I'm going to the hospital. The baby is coming." She didn't ask him to come. She didn't forbid him. The decision, like so many others now, would have to be his. Her own path was clear. She was walking towards motherhood, towards a new beginning, with a strength she hadn't known she had forged in the crucible of pain and betrayal. Willow Creek Manor, once a symbol of a shattered dream, was now simply a house, waiting to be filled with new life, new hope, and the unwavering love of a mother for her child. The birth was long and arduous, a testament to the sheer physical and emotional strength Elara had been forced to cultivate. Lydia was by her side, a constant source of encouragement, her hand a firm anchor during the most intense contractions. Dr. Ainsworth's calm expertise guided them through, her presence a reassuring beacon in the sterile, brightly lit delivery room. Richard arrived midway through, his face etched with anxiety and a hesitant hope. He had driven through the snow-swept night, his mind a whirlwind of regret and a desperate longing to be present, to somehow begin to atone. Elara, caught in the primal intensity of labor, barely registered his arrival. She was in a world beyond apologies or recriminations, a world focused solely on the monumental task of bringing her child into the world. He stood back, a silent, humbled observer, acutely aware of his peripheral role in this sacred, female-centric drama. And then, in the hushed, expectant moments of a winter dawn, Lily May Vance was born. A tiny, perfect being with a surprising shock of dark hair and a lusty cry that sliced through the exhaustion, filling the room with the irrefutable sound of new life. Dr. Ainsworth gently placed Lily onto Elara's chest. The moment their skin touched, a profound, overwhelming wave of love washed over Elara, so potent it left her breathless. This tiny, wrinkled creature, her daughter, was the culmination of all her hopes, the anchor for all her pain, the undeniable proof that life, in its relentless, beautiful way, moves forward. Tears streamed down Elara's face, tears not of sorrow, but of an immense, unutterable joy and relief. Lydia wept openly, her usual tough composure dissolved. Even Richard, standing awkwardly near the door, felt a suspicious prickling behind his eyes, a complex mix of awe, regret, and a fragile, burgeoning love for the child he had almost forfeited the right to know. The days that followed in the quiet cocoon of the hospital were a blur of feeding, sleeping, and gazing in wonder at Lily. Elara felt a transformation occurring within her, a settling. The raw edges of her grief began to soften, overlaid by the all-consuming demands and profound rewards of new motherhood. Richard visited daily, his demeanor tentative, respectful. He brought flowers, offered to run errands, sat quietly holding Lily when Elara rested, his large hands surprisingly gentle. They didn't talk about the betrayal, not yet. The unspoken understanding was that this time was sacred, dedicated to Lily. But Elara observed him, his quiet efforts, the genuine sorrow in his eyes when he looked at her, the nascent wonder when he looked at their daughter. She saw a man grappling with the devastating consequences of his actions, a man who was, perhaps, beginning the long, arduous journey of true remorse. Returning to Willow Creek Manor with Lily was a poignant experience. The house, once a source of such acute pain, now felt different. Lily's presence imbued it with a new energy, a new purpose. The nursery, once a symbol of Elara's solitary strength, was now filled with the soft sounds of a baby's breath, the occasional gurgle, the rhythmic creak of the rocking chair. Lydia stayed for the first week, a formidable, loving presence who managed visitors, cooked nourishing meals, and allowed Elara to focus entirely on Lily. When she left, Elara felt a pang of anxiety, but also a quiet confidence. She could do this. She was doing this. Life settled into a new rhythm, dictated by Lily's needs. The winter landscape outside, once stark and melancholic, now seemed to hold a quiet beauty, a promise of eventual spring. Elara found herself drawing strength from the solitude, from the deep, primal connection with her daughter. Richard began visiting regularly, always calling first, always respectful of Elara's space and boundaries. He changed diapers, learned to soothe Lily's colicky cries, took her for walks in her pram around the frost-covered gardens. He never pushed for reconciliation, never made excuses for his past behavior. Instead, he focused on being a father. He was in therapy, he told Elara quietly one afternoon, and it was helping him understand the roots of his self-destructive choices. Elara listened, her heart guarded but not entirely closed. The wound was still there, a tender scar that would likely always remain. But forgiveness, she was learning, was not about forgetting, nor was it necessarily about restoring what was broken to its original state. Perhaps it was about acceptance, about acknowledging the pain and choosing to move forward, not for his sake, but for her own, and for Lily's. One crisp early spring afternoon, as the first brave crocuses pushed through the thawing earth, Elara was sketching at the kitchen table, Lily asleep in her bassinet nearby. She was designing a small, sustainable community center for a nearby town, a project she'd taken on pro bono. Her architectural dreams, once deferred, were slowly re-emerging, now infused with a new sense of purpose, a desire to create spaces that nurtured, healed, and connected. Richard arrived for his usual visit. He watched her sketch for a moment, a quiet admiration in his eyes. "That looks wonderful, Elara," he said softly. She smiled, a genuine, unforced smile. "Thank you. It feels good to be designing again." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the gentle ticking of the clock and Lily's soft breathing. The oppressive tension that had once defined their interactions was gone, replaced by a fragile, tentative peace. "Elara," Richard began, his voice hesitant, "I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I want you to know. I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn back your trust, not just as Lily's father, but as someone who deeply regrets the pain he caused you." Elara looked at him. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the hard-won humility. The path ahead for them was uncertain. The marriage, as it had been, was gone forever. Whether a new relationship, built on a foundation of honesty and earned trust, could emerge from the ruins, only time would tell. But as she looked at her sleeping daughter, at the hopeful light of spring beginning to touch the landscape outside, Elara felt a profound sense of peace. She had faced the deepest betrayal and had not only survived, but had emerged stronger, more resilient. Her capacity for love deepened by the fierce, unwavering bond with her child. "One day at a time, Richard," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "For now, let's just focus on being the best parents we can be for Lily." He nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. It wasn't absolution, but it was a beginning. Elara picked up her pencil and returned to her sketch, a quiet strength emanating from her. The storm had passed, the wreckage had been cleared, and in its place, under the soft light of a new dawn, Elara Vance was building a new life. A life filled with purpose, resilience, and the enduring, transformative power of a mother's love. Willow Creek Manor, once a symbol of a shattered dream, was now, finally, becoming a home. Her home. Lily's home. A place where healing could take root and where the quiet promise of tomorrow always beckoned.